Hello everybody, my name is Barbara Travieso and I'm a Cuban American. I've been living in Miami since 1990. I left my country in 1998 at the age of 16. I'm doing this video because as an American, I'm appalled of seeing how our children are being indoctrinated into thinking that socialism is a good thing. I grew up in a socialist country. Socialism and communism is the same thing. I grew up in communist Cuba in 1971. I'm 51 years old. And at first I didn't realize because I was too young. But with the experiences and the things that happened to me in that country, in my home country, that I'm seeing reflected in what's happening in the USA today, I think is very similar. I think what's happening in the USA right now is very similar to what happened to my parents in the 1960s when Castro took over power in Cuba. My mother was 27 years old in 1959, and she was a sympathizer of Fidel Castro at the beginning, not Fidel Castro per se, but the movement. She actually participated as selling what they call bonuses and kind of like collecting money for the cause, because there used to be a dictatorship before Castro in Cuba. Although it was a very successful country, Cuba was a very prosperous country in the 1950s. We had, our lives were like kind of very similar to the US. There were cars, American cars in Cuba. We had color TV at the time. The Cuban peso had the same value as the US dollar. Yes, there were things that needed fixing, but nothing compared to what happened after. My experience, like I said, I was born 1971. I was indoctrinated since I was 5 years old. There is no such a thing as private school in Cuba. So all Cuban children are obligated to attend, at the time and still, the public schools. The Cuban regime, or the Cuban dictatorship, because that's what it is, uses education as one of their best things in propaganda. It's one of their first lines of defending the revolution. What happens is that since you're 5 years old, the children are required to participate in political actions. First thing that you do is sounds very simple, and you as a child don't realize it, but you're obligated to salute the flag. That's fine, right? It's a flag, it's a country flag. But you're saying you're a pioneer. They call it pioneer. It's an institution. And you said you're a pioneer pro-communism and you want to be like Che. Che was Ernesto Guevara, an Argentinian that came to Cuba with Castro and killed Cubans for sport. He was communist, he was pro-Chinese, he was a Maoist, a communist China dictator. And we were forced at the age of 5, and 4 sometimes, some children were 4, to say every Friday that you wanted to be like this man. A man who tortured and killed Cubans for sport. Then also you were forced into learning your first letters associated with pro-regime words such as rifle or revolution or Fidel, which is Castro's name, by the way. Fidel was the best. They came and liberated us. Things like that. I mean, your parents still had some vote on it, in the sense like when you go home, they in my case, my parents didn't, but my grandparents did. My grandfather, God bless him, God rest his soul, used to say, "You're being indoctrinated." He used to tell me things that I didn't understand. He used to tell me that the communists stole our country, that they changed the money, so they took everybody's money away. I didn't realize that. I mean, I didn't know anything about that, and my parents were too scared to explain that to me, because if I would repeat it in school, they will go to jail. I grew up without knowing what Christmas was, because it was not a good thing to go to church. My parents were Catholic. My parents and my grandparents were Catholic, and but they kind of like didn't show it because it wasn't good for them. It was like their religion was practiced behind closed doors, especially my parents, because my grandparents will go to church every day, even they participated in church activities, but because they were older, I guess it was hard to like take that away from them. They told me about processions and things like that. I never saw anything like that. In the years I grew up in Cuba, there was no such a thing as, like I said, like as Christmas. Christmas was a regular day. It wasn't observed at all. Not Catholicism or any other religion at all was allowed. I mean, churches were there, but if you go inside church, you were seen as a strange entity, like something was wrong with you, and it would affect your studies in the future, like going into the university or even like getting a job for the adults. So it was like very scarce, the people who would go to church and participate. Then at the age of 12, I'm from a very, very small town in the province of Matanzas. The name of the town is Unión de Reyes. And the middle school was closed by the government, because everything belongs to the government in a communist regime or a socialist regime. Socialism means the means are in the hands of the state. So there's no private property. That's why there's no private schools. It's only public schools. But so they closed the school in my small town, as in many small towns in my province. And we were taken away from our houses into this school where we were going to combine work and studies at the same time. So I would go home every other weekend, and when I was in school, I would work in the fields in the mornings, in my case, and study in the afternoons. So what kind of work did I do? At the age of 12, I had to collect oranges, pick lemons, grapefruit, guava. I remember guava because it was the worst, because we used to collect the guava that was rotten from the floor. It's like under the guava tree. So they used it to make marmalade with it. And whenever you had to pick up one, it was some mushed. It was like turned into mush, and it wouldn't amount to anything. We were supposed to like, sorry, this is hard. Our goal was to collect 4 boxes of guava per child in 4 hours. And in order to get that, I mean, it was so hard that we used to put like green guavas and put it in the bottom, and so just to make it a little bit easier for us because it was so hard. You had to collect this fruit from the bottom, from the floor, and I don't know if you ever done it, but there is this insects in the tree that whenever you shake it, they fall into you, and they're like little ants, but they're so microscopic you can't even see them. But if you scratch, oh my god, that is like burning. It burns so much, and if it gets into your eye, forget it. It's torture. So we were told if we wouldn't do that, we couldn't go on our on the weekend that we were supposed to go home. We were gonna be punished and not go, or when our parents will come to see us on the Sunday that we were staying in the school, they were not gonna allow us to see our parents because we didn't meet the goal. So we were trying. I mean, little children trying to do this is hard, and it's very lonely, and it's very you feel so abandoned as a child. We also had to work cleaning bathrooms. You had to like maintain the area where you work, where you're sleeping, and where you're living. We had to clean the floors, we had to clean the bathrooms. You have to serve, like before you go to work in the fields, you had to work in the breakfast. It was like rotating, but like per groups or classes, you had to help serve. You have to clean all the, not plates, but they were like trays that you eat from. You have to clean it, let everything ready before you go work in the fields. When you come back from then you go to work, and then when you come back, you have to get ready to go to school. You were so tired. Like, I remember being so tired that I remember I used to have a physics class right after right after lunch, and you get up like super early in the morning and work in the Cuban heat, and you get so sleepy that I will fall asleep it was like every time I would fall asleep in that physics class, the first class, because it was a lab, and there was no, like, it was kind of dark in the room, and it was like perfect to fall asleep. I used to, like, my last name starts with a T, so I used to sit all the way in the back and snooze. So I didn't learn much when I was in that school. I used to cry my eyes out every single day, especially Sundays. I hated Sundays with a passion. Because the weekend that we used to go home on a Friday, like late after, like, we were done with everything, like with work and school. They used to take us in a bus back to our town. So that day was pretty much done. So we had Saturday to be with our families, and then we have to return back to that place on a Sunday at noon. To me, that was like, I hated Sundays for years. Even as an adult, I hated Sundays after, like, I finally got it out of my system. But I used to remember that I used to, like, when I was gonna get ready, like, I had to start getting ready, like, about 10:30 on a Sunday that I had to return. And, like, I used to, like, slow down until, like, I closed myself inside a bathroom, and I wouldn't open the door for my parents to, like, because I didn't want to go. But I had to go. And because the thing is that your parents don't really want you to leave, but if you don't go to school, if they decide that they're not going to take you to school, they will end up in jail, because it is illegal for a child not to go to school until the 9th grade. I think you're supposed to be in school. After that, I guess you can, especially for a girl, because boys, when boys turn 15 in Cuba, they're supposed to sign up for the military, and they're drafted, either they want it or not. It's like mandatory. But my parents, when that happened, when they took us away, when they took the school away, they decided, my mother always, I mean, they were never, they never participated with communism, with regime, but my mother always thought that other people, like the people in power, were the ones who were supposed to go. So she never wanted to leave Cuba. But when that happened to us, she decided that it was time because of me. So, but it took us 5 years to leave. So I stayed in Cuba until, like I said, till I was 16, like almost like a month short of turning 17. I'm sorry. I don't have anything written. This is just me talking, and I just, like I said, I just want to warn people what communism is. Everything that they give you in school in Cuba is not real. It's like whatever, like history. And I remember like I was a very, very good student. I love history, and I don't remember a thing about like hearing about World War II. Like everything was a lie. Cuba was a satellite of the USSR at the time. So they definitely indoctrinated us. We had to study Marxism. I think you start studying Marxism in 9th grade. I'm not sure, but every single thing they give you in school is politics. It's related to like how great Castro was and how good the revolution was and how bad the Americans were. Anyway, I think I talked 16 minutes, so I'm gonna stop right now. If this is something that interests you, I appreciate you following me. I'm just gonna leave it as this. There's one thing I want to say though. One little anecdote I want to say. When I was 9 years old, 1980. It was the Mario boatload. I don't know if anybody remembers that. Anybody that's watching me remembers that. But I remember they used to be like what they call it. And I cannot think of a translation right now of the word. But they used to like at the end of the day take force like people from the workplaces and take them to the houses of people who were living in the country, who were non-gusanos, worms. They call them worms. Castro called them worms, which is the same term that Hitler used, by the way. So the workplaces formed these meetings, and all these people will go into in front of the house of somebody who was leaving the country, who was leaving Cuba because they didn't like the Cuban government or the Cuban regime, and they would throw eggs at them and insult them, and like it was a thing, like every day after 5. I remember that happening to a family that it was our friends with my family, and it was like daily, like they couldn't open their doors or because they were like threatening them that they were gonna. Like I remember there was a lady who was pregnant, and they were saying like, get the pregnant lady out, we're gonna make her have her baby. It was awful. So, but I remember one day when I was a child at the time. I think I was in 3rd grade, and we used to have like 2 shifts, like going to school, like in the morning, and then you go to lunch, and then in the afternoon. It was like pretty much like things that weren't like the classes were not that important. Like maybe you wouldn't have your teacher, but you have like an assistant teacher who would like go over whatever classes you were doing in the day. And that assistant teacher took us out of the school and told us, we're going to so-and-so's house, and you're going to repeat this. You're going to say this, started saying like, you're like old lady who's selling her country for jeans or things like that, things that didn't make sense. And one of them says, you're going to scream at him something about Johnson, the American president. And the other ones, there were 2 teachers, and the other one said, oh no, it's not Johnson anymore, it's Carter now. And I was like, in my child's mind, I was like, oh my God, that country's really messed up because they keep changing these presidents. I was like, little I know that I was the one with the real problem. But good thing that my parents told me, like remember that time, my parents told me, you would not scream anything to anybody, no matter what. You're not, you're not gonna be disrespectful. These people are good people that we know, that we're friends with. So I went because I was a child, and they took the whole school. And I remember in the middle of that, there were like this horrible, there was like a huge crowd in front of this lady's house. Really nice lady, I remember. And they were like screaming things at him, like insults and bad words. And I mean, I was an only child. I wasn't supposed to say bad words or anything. And here comes my mother out of nowhere, like an angel, with an ice cream cone. She had an ice cream cone. She was eating an ice cream cone, and she had one for me. And she said, "Here, you're gonna take this. And when you're eating, you're not supposed to be talking." So she took me out of there. She prevented me from being part of that. To this day, I'm so grateful she did that. I'm so sorry. Thank you. Thank you for listening. This is a catharsis for me. I've never done this in English, so I'm so sorry for my broken English. I hope somebody learned something from it. Thank you.